Hey, miss, how are you?
Doing well. How are you? I'm a little tired. It's been a crazy week, but I'm doing
Well,
well.
I know, and it just started. Like, this is just Tuesday.
I know. I feel like I'm coming off of last week, and then Malaika had a cold over the weekend. So now, of course, I have the cold, but
Oh,
he's doing well.
is this his first cold?
Second, he had roseola a couple months ago.
Dang, he's just being a human.
I know, but it took a while for us to have the first one. We were so confused because he's always so healthy. We were like, why are you just laying there?
It's usually the only time when little boys are still is when they're
Yeah,
not
it's very
feeling too
concerning.
good. They're either really still or moving really fast. I'm like, one of those two is not
One of
me.
those two. Yeah, nothing in the middle.
So let
How
me
are
be.
you?
I'm well, my dear. So nice to see your face.
It's good to
So,
see yours.
so I let me be a little official and welcome everybody to this evening. My name is Samsara Morgan. I'm the executive director and founder of the Oakland Better Birth Foundation. And we are so honored, so honored to have a wonderful friend and client and all the beautiful things. And the Malaika Tubbs here to talk about her beautiful book, Three Mothers. So may I say how proud I am of you. I know you've been working on this project for quite some time, and we talked about it when we were supporting you through getting ready to have your beautiful firstborn.
Yes.
And I, I'm just so happy that a book about women, a book about mothers, is being as well received as your book is being. Is that startling to you? How do you feel about that? Uh-oh. Don't be frozen.
Oh, sorry, my Wi-Fi went out. I'm back now.
Okay. You're back. Did you hear my question?
I did not hear the question. I just heard the great introduction and then it was done.
The question was, well, my statement was that uh, I'm so gratified that a book about three women, three mothers, is being so well received.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you feel about that.
I feel incredible about it. And it's actually been so crazy. Even my publishers weren't ready for the book to do as well as it's been doing. So in March, we sold out of copies everywhere. There, you couldn't find a copy of it, which is kind of a good problem, but also not, because I'm like, why didn't you print enough copies? You all didn't think
What's wrong with
people wanted.
y'all?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
didn't think people wanted to hear motherhood stories. Actually, a lot of people do. And it's not just women, it's all of us. We want to know about our moms. We want to know about our those that are doing mothering work. You know, it's not only biological motherhood, but through our caretakers and those that have raised us. And so I wasn't shocked at all that all of these people from all different walks of life wanted to hear these women's stories. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and the book has been received so well. And I've been really spoiled by fantastic reviews. And my biggest thing is just making sure more people know these women's names: Alberta King, Burtis Baldwin, and Louise Little, the impact they had on our lives still to this day, as well as how we really honor the role of motherhood and how we really embrace the feminine and the strength and the critical nature of this role in our society.
absolutely. Would you mind sharing what spurred you on to take on this project in this book?
Definitely. So there are a lot of things that lead to every accomplishment, you know, every big milestone. It all starts back from the beginning of life. So I'll fast forward a little bit. When I was starting my PhD, I just knew I wanted to help contribute to those that were fighting the erasure of Black women's stories. I was incredibly inspired by Margot Lee Shetterly's Hidden Figures. And for those that haven't read the book, you've probably heard of the movie, but it's about the Black female mathematicians who were behind the space launch, basically. But it was a moment where I felt inspired by their stories, but also incredibly frustrated that they'd been kept from me my whole life. And it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't that somebody kind of said, we forgot to tell you. It was actually Black women. It was very intentional to erase them from the narrative. And so I just wanted to find more hidden figures. That's what I knew. And then my mom had always spoken so beautifully about motherhood. She'd always said, if you focus on how mothers are treated in a society, that'll be an indicator as to how that society is doing in every other way. If that society has things like parental leave, if that society has, access to midwives and to doulas, if that society has universal childcare, then that society will do well because they're really honoring that role. But if they don't, if they ignore that, if they ignore the needs of this primary caretaker, then very little will be able to be successful as a result. And so she always told me this. I was raised as a very powerful, very influential mother. And so I knew with my project, I was also going to have something to do with motherhood, and decided on these three because I wanted to address the notion that the civil rights movement was led by men. So I wanted to kind of draw people in to make them think they were going to continue to hear about the same men that we all love and revere. But instead, it's still a woman's story. So it's a little bit of a trick, a little bit of I knew what would sell. I knew how many people would pick up the book if it said James Baldwin, MLK, Malcolm X, and I could still celebrate Black mothers' stories as a result. And people walk away knowing so much more about us. And it's been really exciting for people to fall in love with the three of them in the way that I have.
Well, it's a stroke of genius because he's a beloved gentleman. And in different stratas, even like different people love these men for different reasons.
Yeah.
The LGBTQ community loves Mr. Baldwin. Everybody who has any sense loves MLK. So these men were just really, really key leaders in their specific roles, and have a lot of overlap, a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
So I could see how it would really draw in people's attention and have them want to know more and want them to have to learn how these part of how these men became who they are. Because of course they did have fathers and they did grow up in communities and things impacted them to bring out their amazingness in different ways. And all of these men had to, of course, deal with racism and white supremacy. And how did they do that? How did they get the strength to do that? Right. How do you respond to people? I've heard, me, I'm talking about motherhood all the time. That's what I do.
Of course.
And so some folks say, oh, that's such a burden to think that I'm so responsible. I don't want to feel responsible for, mothers are always blamed. Have you gotten any of that? People feeling like overburdened in the responsibility in their motherhood? And how do you respond to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's so interesting because so often in the US, especially, this role of motherhood is looked at more as kind of not something that we honor, but more a second-class citizenship kind of role. A lot of my friends, I was younger than a lot of my friends in starting my family, and my partner and I've been, together since college. And so the timeline it worked for us. And so many of my friends have said things like, whoa, are you sure you're ready? Because you're going to lose yourself. You might lose your identity. Like this is what happens with moms, and they're not appreciated and no one sees them anyway. It's really framed in that way for sure. So part of it, I do think, is for many of us to kind of change our own mindset around our motherhood and what it means, the power of it, the influence of it, the strength of it. And you see that so clearly in these three women, that who they were before they became moms, their activism, their art, what they were passionate about translates directly into what they carry forward in their motherhood. So it's not like they become a brand new person. It's a continuation of who they are, a continuation of their identity. And it's so amazing to see that impact. So it's not about erasing the woman who was there before the child, but instead still celebrating that. But secondly, there is also a reason that women feel unsupported in the role and feel the burden. It's related to policy. It's not necessarily that we're imagining the fact that we don't have supports in place. We saw this during the pandemic, especially with mothers of color being forced to leave the workforce because they had to choose between being moms or making money. And that is an insane decision for somebody to have to make. It
Yeah.
shouldn't fall on the individual. There should be nets in place, societal nets that catch that person and say, you're going to still be able to do both. It shouldn't fall on the individual in the way that it very uniquely fell on individual women in the United States. So I'm always careful in saying, yes, on one hand, we need to not accept this notion that it's such a burden and that we are going to have to be completely selfless as mothers and put everybody's needs ahead of ours. Like, that's what we're congratulated for. You know, the more you kind of deny yourself and you do whatever it takes to be there for your children, that's when we're like, well, that's a really great mother. I think that culture needs to shift. I think it's more so the more human a mother can be. It's okay for her to be vulnerable. It's okay for her to share her responsibilities with her community. It's community mothering. It's a village. It takes a village to raise a child. It's not, you're the only person that we're going to put all of this weight on you. But on top of that, we need to have actual change so that it's not impacting women in the way that it does in the US with high rates of postpartum depression. It's this immediate realization there are not many things that are going to support you in the same ways that women are supported in other places.
Yeah, I mean, the restoration of the village is really important in that piece.
Yeah.
Because mothering and fathering, these are not really meant to be a two-person job.
No.
You know, if every human child, in my estimation, needs about 50 people.
I agree.
You know,
I completely agree.
well, and each one of those people are important. My children love having a big village. I love aunties and grandmas and all these other people who also support and help the family. We're caught with such, in this culture, such an either or. Either the mom is everything or she's nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so the thought of working cooperatively and collaboratively in life in general, much less parenting, is like, and like using your mom's yardstick around what makes a healthy community, we're not doing very well. We look, especially looking at the things that you've mentioned, but then mortality.
Yeah.
Women dying in childbirth, Black women most of all. But it's not safe for any woman. Oh, did we lose her? Nope, there you are.
I'm right here.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
we have women who, dying in childbirth should be a very rare, almost unheard of thing. And we lose more babies before their first birthday than any other industrialized country. It's abominable.
Right.
So, the question that's popping into my mind is, when you started your project, you were not pregnant then.
No, I was not.
So you went through this transformation while you were writing still?
Yeah.
Of having little adorable Michael Malachi?
Yeah, my little baby boy. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cute.
He really is.
Mika sends her love. She is out of birth right now.
Oh, wonderful. Another baby in the world.
Another cutie. So talk to me about that transition. Was your image or feelings around mother shifted as you yourself became a mother?
It was so beautiful for me to be writing this book and focusing on these three incredible women, but also diving very deep into maternal theory for my PhD and understanding the differences between, what white feminist maternal theory had said versus Black feminist maternal theory. It's a really fascinating world of, in a lot of white feminist theory, it said that motherhood is the reproduction of patriarchy, and instead that women should try to avoid it as much as possible, really. And that even, if you're a working mom, you shouldn't tell anybody that, working in the sense of like paid work, because we're all working moms, but that you shouldn't tell anybody that you are a mother. But, it was something that was kind of, you should hide. There's so much theory around it that's really problematic and very patriarchal.
Well, I remember being referred to as a breeder in certain feminist circles.
Right. Exactly. Versus with women of color, and especially Black women, motherhood is more so an opportunity to transform the world. We see us passing our love and our liberatory practices to our children, and it's the recreation of the world. I think June Jordan is the one who said it best: when a child is born, the world begins again. And especially for Black mothers, where it's been taken from us for so many years, with relating back to slavery, we were taken from our children and our children were taken from us. And so this reclamation of the revolutionary power of Black motherhood is so beautiful. And for me to be studying that thinking about these three women and then expecting my firstborn, while also being well aware of the Black maternal health crisis and many of my studies and much of what I'd written about, I had an immediate fear at first of, oh goodness, you know, what's going to happen to me? I know this is a battle for myself and for my child. But what the three women taught me, Alberta, Burtis, and Louise, was that I still had agency, I still had power, and there were things that I needed to do to make sure that these circumstances were not inevitable for me, that I could speak my voice, that I could find others who were going to be with me. And this is why I sought doulas to begin with. I said, okay, I am not a conquered victim. I can't just sit here and say, oh, well, let me sit here in my fear. I have to reclaim my joy and enjoy my pregnancy and be excited about the moment that my child is born. And I'm not going to let all of these outside factors make me think that I'm supposed to sit here and just be okay with being treated with bias in a healthcare system, or to go in unprepared without the supports that I'm going to need right beside me. It was also a political decision. I'm coming in with other women of color beside me. And I need to make sure that I will be heard. And I could feel the difference. You know, when we went into my labor, Kathleen and Mika were with me, and I was respected in a way that was very different than I think a lot of my friends felt when they went in alone, feeling like they just had to somehow know what to ask for or how to speak for themselves when this was their first time doing this. Yeah. I felt so ready and so prepared to voice what I wanted in my labor, and beyond. So that's really actually what led into my wanting to work with doulas. And this time I'm going to do a home birth, which I'm very excited. I just met my midwife.
Another one coming, another cute coming.
August. I'm so excited. So yeah, I have a completely different vision of my motherhood than so many of my friends do. And I try my best to help them feel that same level of agency and power. But it's very hard because, as we all know, there are all these systems operating to tell women, you don't know what you're doing. Exactly. So just trust us. And it's so heartbreaking. Samsara, you and I talked about it so much, but now that I feel like my eyes have been opened in many ways, it's so difficult for me with so many of my girlfriends, because they just see it completely differently. It's not trusting in their motherhood. It's not trusting in their own power. It's completely, I have no idea what I'm doing. They're just going to tell me what to do. And in order to be a mom, I feel like you just at least have to have a level of confidence that you can get through the day making the right decisions for yourself and for your children. And when that's taken from you, even before your child is born, it's sad.
And it's such a disabling situation. It's very abusive.
Yeah.
To rob a woman of that primal agency. It's not, I'm very matriarchal in my thinking. So, women, we run everything, we always have, and we need to. And it only makes sense when a grounded woman is running it. That's just,
yeah. Yeah.
And, having the exquisite experience of having a baby prepares you to be the mother of that child in a very specific way. Yeah. And you will see, now you're having pregnancy number 2. It's going to be different than pregnancy number 1, because there's a brand new human consciousness coming through you. And you will there's new things that this little one will need, and the ancestors are talking to you right now. And when that little one is in your arms, you scoop up your second born, you will already know so much and feel so much, that you learn from being Michael Malaika's mother. And then that extrapolates into being this new little one's mother.
Yeah.
There's a power and dignity in that every woman who decides to have a baby deserves, and they're being robbed of.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. It really is. So, do you have any information of the men you studied? Do you have their birth stories?
Yeah, a little bit.
Can I
wish we knew more, but there is a little bit. Yes. So with Alberta and Louise, they both gave birth to these famous sons of theirs at home. They all had a lot of children, I should also say. Alberta had 3 children, Burtis had 9, and Louise had 8 children. And so Burtis goes to the hospital with James Baldwin. He's born in Harlem, at the Harlem Hospital. And this would have been a segregated situation. So definitely not what she, not as probably as pleasant as it was for Alberta and for Louise. But she was a single mother, and she was very poor, and similar in terms of what we're talking about, of maybe not feeling that same sense of power and trust in herself to do something that her body knew how to do, or even being able to, I don't know what was available to her in Harlem. So her birth story is a little harder, but at least we know, of course, immediately she falls in love with Jimmy, her firstborn. And then with Alberta King, she wanted to have home births. So all 3 of her children were born in her home on the 2nd level of their house. And even if you go to Atlanta, you can visit the room where she gave birth to her children.
Oh, I love
born. It's very powerful, and I've been there. And there's even this really cute story about, the midwife goes with her and her mom is with her, and they're upstairs in the room, and they weren't letting men in at the time. Sorry, a plane is flying by, so there's some background noise. But he's pacing, MLK Sr. is pacing back and forth outside in the hall. And as soon as he starts to hear any of the baby's noises, he jumps up and like hits the ceiling. He was so excited with his finger. So it was like, it's really cool to just imagine them there, and you can just really picture it. It's really wonderful. And then with Louise Little, and I think it has a lot to do with her philosophy around even freedom fighting. She's this radical activist. She believes in the Marcus Garvey movement. So it's all about Black independence, Black pride, self-sufficiency, not relying on the system that oppresses you for anything. So pretty much everything we know Malcolm X for, this is directly Louise Little. It's so obvious that he's her son. And so it makes sense that she would do a home birth as well with him. That house, since he was born, has since been torn down. So you can't go and visit that home, but he was also born at home.
I'm remembering with Malcolm X's mama that she, being an activist and going through all that she went through, of course, she ran afoul of white supremacy all around her.
Yeah.
And that resulted in some mental concerns for her. Did you verify that?
Well, actually what happened, so in the way we've spoken about her thus far is kind of this very awful reduction of her story. We've said, and it's a terrible way of speaking about a person, but that she quote unquote went crazy. Terrible way to talk about someone. And then she was taken away from her children were taken away from her. The context behind that, actually, and I'm so excited for when you all dive into the book, because there's so many of these moments where you realize everything's been taken out of context. The sexism and the racism and the classism that's been used against these women, and the ways in which we've continued to perpetrate that in history, are so violent and so painful. Because with Louise Little, she is this activist. So there's, white supremacists all around her. Her and her husband are both activists. They actually meet at a Marcus Garvey meeting. And because they're both so brave, Marcus Garvey really takes note of them. She's also very intelligent. Louise Little is a multilingual woman. She writes really beautifully. So she writes for the Negro World newspaper. And so he sends them, this couple, to different places in the Midwest to incite the revolutionary spirit of Black communities there. So it's very strategic for them to be known by the KKK and another white supremacist group called the Black Legion. So they want them to know, like they're trying to agitate them on purpose. But because of that, they also are the victims of many attacks against them. So they have 8 children together. And at one point, their children are sleeping. It's the middle of the night. Their house catches fire. These white men have thrown these fire bombs at their home, not caring at all for the children that are sleeping in there. They get all their children out safely, thank goodness. Just a few years later, though, Earl Little is murdered. And then it's deemed an accident or a suicide. So therefore, Louise Little is not given the supports that she deserves. And then she, again, is this radical Marcus Garvey follower. She does not want to depend on the state for anything. And many of us are aware of this as well, when welfare workers start to become a part of the picture, but they don't see this woman, this Black woman with dignity, and they don't think that she deserves to be treated with respect. They're saying things to her and about her, and she's well aware, again, of what they're trying to do to her. And so she stands up for herself. She said, you're not going to treat me like this in my own home. These are my children. I can take care of them myself. But they start to pull her children aside, saying, saying, or, do you think something's wrong with your mom? She's acting a little crazy. This is to her own children. They really villainize this woman in their eyes. And they send a white male doctor to the house to diagnose her because they say that she's being resistant to them.
Wow.
And so this white male doctor writes a doctor's note, and it's in the book verbatim. He says, she is imagining being discriminated against.
Wow.
About a Black immigrant woman in this time period, or in this time. And he says about her, well, there's a couple different things he says. Number one, he judges her because she has a recent newborn. He's 8 months old. And he believes like, okay, well, she already had 7 kids and now she has 8. So this is a judgment of her having children. Which again, women of color know this feeling very well.
Yeah.
He says she has a change in her mood. Well, clearly her husband was murdered, so she might be depressed. That would be likely.
Hello. Yeah, I think so.
That would be likely, but he calls it a change in personality. And then he says she's imagining being discriminated against, and he diagnoses her with dementia praecox. And this is enough to put her away behind bars. Well, she calls it her incarceration. She believes she's being incarcerated. It's in a mental institution for 25 years of her life against her will.
Goodness.
And during these 25 years, she continues to say, I am not imagining anything. So all of these notes that are written about her from the state, between the doctors and the state, are she continues to resist us. She continues to fight back, which in my mind, I read as a nevertheless she persisted kind of moment. Totally. And she's released from the institution after 25 years of being in there. She's reunited with her children. Now they're adults. They have their own families. She gets to see Malcolm again. Just a year later, though, he is assassinated. So they only have that 1 year left together. And then she lives for another 25 years.
Wow.
She doesn't die until 1991.
Wow.
And all her family who got to see her grandchildren, even Malcolm, before he's assassinated, says she did not show any of the symptoms that they diagnosed her with. She remembers everything very clearly, even after these 25 years of torture. So that is the story. There's
nothing wrong with her. She was just refusing to be gaslit.
And probably she was depressed. She probably needed someone to help her or talk to her, but in terms of imagining the hatred that you're facing on a daily basis.
And her husband had been murdered.
Yeah. But we produced it. And even now, those of us who are like woke still say things like, oh, I know, it's so sad. We
had all these issues. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. That is really important and powerful to know. And now Martin Luther King's mama, she outlived her son, which is the nightmare of every parent as well.
All 3 of them do, unfortunately.
All 3 mothers outlived their children.
Yeah.
How did that affect these three mothers?
Yeah.
Their sons.
All 3 of them outlived their famous sons, not all of their children. But in 2 cases, they outlived 2 of their children. So Alberta outlives 2 of her sons, and Burtis also outlives 2 of her sons. So like you said, the worst fear that a parent can imagine. And with these instances, it's so hard to even really talk about because they were so invested in helping their children understand the importance of fighting for freedom. All 3 of these women were activists. They believed in fighting for social justice and Black freedom, but in very different ways and very similar to the ways in which the sons differed from each other, actually. So Alberta King believes that she's a religious leader. Her parents are the leaders of Ebenezer Baptist Church. She grows up in the church. She attends marches. She participates in boycotts. They are some of the first members of the NAACP. So these are the tactics that she really perfects and carries forward into her motherhood. The difference between her and MLK Jr. is that he calls it nonviolence, but it's the exact same thing. He just calls it something else. Right. Then with Burtis Baldwin, she is a writer, and she believes that with her art and her craft, she can help people through the darkness and through their pain, and really, help them to see things differently and give them a new perspective. She wants them to find love and light. This is her essence. It's all about light and love. And then James Baldwin, the famous writer James Baldwin, calls himself later a witness to the power of light. It's not just a beautiful thing that he's saying, he's directly quoting his mother, which we didn't know before this book. And then Malcolm X, like I said, this activist believes in Black pride, Black independence. You stand up for yourself by any means necessary, even if it means you lose your life, even if it means everything's taken from you. You want to stand up for yourself. This is what we revere Malcolm X for. So it's these clear, so I say all that because we know that these sons will pass away before them. I state that at the beginning of the book, but these mothers have trained them to do what they're doing. So how much of a conflict that must feel for these moms and, so many moms of Black children where
too many moms.
It's all about educating, on being aware of what's happening in the world, that they were aware of Jim Crow. They couldn't hide them from that, but that they didn't want them to be defined by that. So they said, here are the strategies we have used as a family to fight back. Maybe you'll do the same with us. You'll join us in this fight. They didn't know they were going to become these famous men who not only were going to be revered by some, but threatened on a daily basis by others. So that conflict that I constantly imagine them feeling between they've done what I've taught them to do, and that's going to cost them their life, is so heartbreaking and so painful. And what they sacrificed for all of us is just, there aren't words to describe that. But to just give some additional details, yes, MLK we know is assassinated. And then only a year later, actually, his brother is found drowning in his own pool. His brother was also a civil rights leader and very active in the movement. And so no one knows to this day how this happened because he was a good swimmer. It was his own pool. So there's definitely a lot of suspicion around that. Yeah. And Alberta focuses on her grandchildren at that point. She wants to make sure that she educates the next generation of her family, especially those that now did not have fathers anymore. And she also gets to witness the work of her son continue beyond his life, which I think at least offers a little bit of comfort. But she herself then is assassinated in her church. She was shot in the back.
I remember reading that. How tragic.
Tragic. That family had so much that they suffered through. And then with Louise Little, of course, we now know the story. She's been taken from them for 25 years, then only has a year with Malcolm X before he's assassinated. There's not much we know after that, other than that she would live for so long and that she spent all of her time with her, now reunited with her children, meeting all of her grandchildren. So especially in Malcolm and Betty's case, their children know Louise a lot better than Malcolm ever did. So it was an honor for me to be able to interview one of Betty and Malcolm's daughters who knew her grandmother very well, and calls herself her grandmother's keeper because of everything she taught her about organizing. And then thirdly, with Burtis, we know James Baldwin had a longer life than his friends, Malcolm and Martin. But still, I would say that he dies before his time as a result of how difficult this kind of work is. He's speaking and traveling to all these places that are largely white. He's also being threatened constantly, develops cancer. It was just a stressful life for him to live. So the fact that his mom outlives him as well is of course tragic. But she also spends her last years educating her grandchildren, getting to know even some of her great-grandchildren. Burtis Baldwin doesn't die until 1999. So her life even overlaps with mine. Her life overlaps on one hand with Harriet Tubman. She was born in 1902. Harriet Tubman passed away in 1913. And then on the other end of her life overlaps with me. I was born in 92 and she passed away in 99.
Wow. Wow.
You gotta read the book. You're gonna love the book.
I totally am sure of that. And just, I am not a person that shrinks away from the sense of responsibility of being a mama. I've been blessed to feel like it's definitely been a gift in my life to be a mom, and how it has spurred all the beautiful things that I've done since I birthed my kids. These stories are examples of how these beautiful sons, all in their different ways, emulated the gifts that they got from their mothers,
Yeah.
incorporated their words even into the words that they would write and use and share to open hearts and open minds to wherever they were, whatever they were teaching on, whether it's social justice, racial justice, being an artist, the life of an artist under white supremacy, and holding your head up in the face of it, being free in the face of it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a the pietà of the mothers, outliving their sons, who are out doing this amazing work. I mean, I think it just definitely wells me up inside thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very emotional.
And it's also, it takes courage to do all you can to raise your son to be great. And that what that means is that your son is himself.
Yep.
If there's greatness in that, that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And in order though for, Audre Lorde talks a lot about this, like how you raise Black children and how you're going to raise them to survive and also love, but also to be aware of what's happening around them and the constant conflict of that. Yes. And a part of raising children who know who they are is they're very aware of what's happening, but they're not limited by that. And so therefore they're always going to try to do things to change these other people's myopic visions of what's possible for the world. But that will put them in danger. That's the heartbreaking thing, but it's not as if we can save them from that danger by not telling them what's happening. And again, another Audre Lorde quote is this notion of you could be afraid and do nothing, or you can be afraid and do something that might change the reason that you're afraid for somebody else later. And that's really what they did for us.
It's such an important point. Very often when our Black boys are stopped by cops or things happen, or Black men are stopped by cops, and people say, well, why didn't you just do just listen to the cop, just do what they wanted them to do? And I'm like, that is the absolute opposite of raising a strong, clear man. If you're being impinged upon, if your boundaries are being violated, it is actually the appropriate response to push back. It doesn't mean you slug the cop, but it means like, excuse me, officer, please explain, am I being arrested? Right? And so I think one of the challenges of being a mother is to not, and a lot of people do it too, like, well, just follow the rules to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Well, as we know, it doesn't matter whether
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
An abusive system is an abusive system. It's going to abuse.
And we'll always find a way to blame the victim.
All the time. He had a comb, it looked like a gun, and then I don't know what my taser looks like.
Yeah.
Do you have any information about how these wonderful mothers kept their children's spirits alive? What did they? Yeah,
it was a really important part, I would say, of their wanting their children to be fighters for freedom, but to also understand that they were a part of something larger, that it wasn't all on them. It wasn't, even when I'm raising my children and I want them to be aware of what's happening in the world and what we're still fighting against, and not be ignorant to that, and to know that we have to be a part of the change somehow. It's also not saying that every single moment of our day we have to be fighting.
Exactly.
Because we're not the only ones. We are a part of a beautiful, beautiful community of people who are fighting, which means that we also have moments to just love and be happy and rest. It's a strategy of oppression to make us think that we can't have moments to live while we're fighting. And so I would say that all of these moms in different ways give their children that in multiple. So with Burtis Baldwin saying to James, you can write and you can go see plays. And this was something his stepfather did not want him to do. He was very much against it. And this is a very abusive man, James Baldwin's stepfather, Burtis Baldwin's husband. And so she has to stand up for him in a very violent circumstance, but she does whatever she can so that James can have joy and can really focus on dreaming and creating and following this passion for writing, which is so revolutionary because he's her eldest son. They are a poor Black family in Harlem. You would think that she would have put a lot more pressure on him to do something that maybe would have given more money or had more of a guarantee for money.
Exactly.
But instead she believes that he just needs to do, she says, there's an interview of her where she says he just needed to write. That's all I knew. He just needed to write. And so, and it's just so simple to her. And she guards that for him. She guards that joy. And it turns out it ends up being very lucrative for him. And he can come back and buy her a house later, but that was no guarantee. And she still believed in his joy. And with Alberta King, anytime anything tries to crush her child's spirit, her children's spirit, she sits with them. She explains to them what's going on. She says, these are the reasons, you know, why somebody's treating you differently, but it's not the natural order of things. And you need to know that this is not how it's meant to be. But also then, you know, we'll sit down with them at meals, and always they have this tradition in the King family. When the children come home from school, every night they have these family meals where elders in the community sit with them, going back to that community mothering we were talking about. And they talk about what's happening in the world, and the kids can bring their concerns to the table, and they're constantly affirmed, not only by their mother, not only by their father, but by this community of people that see them and say, you are worthy of love. You're worthy of dignity and respect. And it's this constant reinforcement of that matters. And then with Louise, she really cares deeply again about them being very self-sustaining, knowing how to hunt and knowing how to garden their own food and grow their own food. So there's these beautiful moments in the book where Malcolm talks about his favorite thing to grow were peas. And so he would sit there and pull little worms out of his plants and then lay by his peas and stare up at the sky and dream about his future. So there's moments that she knew her children also needed that connection to nature and really encourages them to do these really relaxing practices. So it was just, there's so many moments of just continuing to live and find joy despite being aware of what's happening around you.
That is so wonderful.
Yeah.
That is so wonderful. I want to open things up and let folks ask you questions if they have any, because I know you will soon need to leave us to put your beautiful baby to bed.
Yeah, I think I have like 10 more minutes.
So, any burning questions, feelings, desires?
I just wanted to thank you so much for coming today, and also just for writing this book, because it feels like whether we're doing birth work or racial justice work or food sovereignty or peace work, it all calls out for us to hear mothers and mothering stories. And it was just really beautiful to learn that we were going to get to meet you and hear from you this week after Midwives Day and with everything else that's happening in this country. And it just feels very timely. So I'm excited to read your book, and thank you for all the heart that went into it.
Thank you. And thank you for the heart that's going into your work. I think birth workers are just heroes and incredible. And I'm so honored to be in this space with you all. I'm just grateful that you're doing your work day in and day out, especially through this pandemic and how awful it has been. I'm grateful. And there's a section actually in the book where I talk entirely about doulas and midwives. So that's in there.
Thank you for the props there. That's
shout
really
out.
good.
Yeah.
You know, because we know we never did get our governor to declare us essential.
I know. We
That
tried.
never did happen. We tried hard. And I really want to thank you for your help in that as well, because, you know, you definitely reached out and like talked to this person, and, you know, it was great. We fought hard.
Yeah.
And we're still fighting.
I'll keep talking about you though. You are featured in my Time piece that came out last week.
I saw that.
And there's a Guardian article coming out where I'm talking entirely about the power of doulas. So I will keep using my platform as much as I possibly can.
I really appreciate that. It was such a pleasure to be on your birth team and to, you know, just help that whole beautiful story unfold. I mean, you and your sweet husband had done such good work in preparation to be parents. Just
thank you.
Definitely big tears and lots of emotions for me of happiness for you and your family.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else wanted to say something, ask a question?
I just wanted to thank you so much for writing this book, listening. I can't wait to read it, but listening to you talk about it, especially the last things you were saying in the last couple minutes, about just all the little things that mothers do. I think a lot of times mothers feel like they should be doing more to like make the world better, or to make their mark on the world, or to be somebody. And like all of us who are mothers know, you're so busy raising your children and feeding them and caring for them and protecting them and educating them, and it, you know, it can feel like, wow, I didn't get to do anything for the world, I didn't get to make an impact. But it sounds like through your book, you're really helping us all remember that everything we do for our children does make an impact, and that motherhood is like the most important job, not only the hardest and the best, but also the most important job. So I just want to thank you as a mother for writing this book.
Oh, that means the world to me. And that's exactly it. You said it so beautifully. The summary of really what I wanted to accomplish. What we're doing day in and day out is the most important work. And I remember feeling when Malaika was born, I felt like I was being unproductive at first. Like I had gotten so used to doing all of this writing and all of this reading and all my research and et cetera, and organizing and meetings all the time with people and blah, blah, blah. And it felt in a lot of ways that all of that stopped. And that all of a sudden I wasn't like, I said to my husband, I'm not productive. Why am I not being productive? And I need more time to be productive. And then I sat down and thought about it. Again, I was editing the book at this point when he was born. So there were different stages of this book with my son. And I thought the most productive thing I can possibly do is not only keep this child alive, but make sure this child's happy and learning. And we're doing that together. And I have never done something more productive than that. So I'm going to quit thinking that I need to have some kind of meeting with somebody where they're just talking at me for no reason, or that I need to sit there and just be writing. Like there is nothing more powerful than me sitting with my kiddo, thinking about how he is seeing the world. And as soon as I embraced that, it was so not only more fun, I would say, to be a mom, but also I just really saw my role with much more clarity. So even though I was studying these things, it still happened to me too, where all of a sudden I was like, I need to be doing more. And it's just not the case. I've learned even so much more as a mother than in any of my other jobs.
It's just so nice to talk about, because it's so not anything that the society that we live in emphasizes at all.
No.
As important or valuable. It's like what you do in your free time is mothering, and what you do behind the desk is work.
Yeah.
You know, and like back to all that.
Yeah. Well, people even really disrespect it. You can tell sort of, like when Malaika and I would be at home, if we had, for instance, like a contractor who was working on our house he would show up whenever. It was like, it didn't matter what my schedule was or like what we were doing. It was like, well, she was just at home with her kid. And it's like, no, you like need to respect the space also that mothers are creating for their children. And like, it happens all the time, that disrespect. But that's something that I'm really not willing to accept. And I think people need to better understand even the planning that goes into motherhood, and the thinking and the creativity of what am I going to do today with my kid, and what am I going to try to teach them, or when you're those moments when you're really calling on your patience, and what you're trying to emulate or what you're trying to build. The family is the first society, and exactly. How we're picturing the world, we're modeling that, and that takes so much intentionality and even reflection as to who we are. Malaika is, he's the sweetest, he's an angel, but he's recently been going through this phase where he's starting to find his words, but they're not quite there yet. So when he's frustrated, he tries to pull my hair. So he just always is trying to pull my hair right now. And in those moments, where if anybody else pulls your hair, of course, you're like, what the hell are you doing? Exactly. But it's your kid. And I have to say to myself, okay, I'm working on my intentionality and on my peace and on that's a lot of effort to not just react in a way that you might react, because you're being intentional about how you're raising your child. That is such incredible work. So I'm learning more and more. My kiddo's so young, And I'm going to keep honoring motherhood because it requires that energy.
It introduces us to the best in ourselves.
Yeah.
It shows us our shadow big time. And in order to be a healthy person, we have to confront our shadow, and we have to make peace with our shadow and bring our best selves as best we can. Nobody's perfect, to our mothering every day. And you can't help but be amazing if you do that consciously. You can't help it, you know? And so I really thank you for having an environment, having this beautiful book where we can talk, where in my belief system is the most important thing that people can do with parenting and for sure mothering. Does anyone else have anything to say before we start to say goodbye? I want to make sure that nobody who wants to say or ask anything.
I wanted to say thank you, if I may, just as a male doula, as a man. I mean, the highlighting that you've done, speaking about the bond and the impact of the maternal influence on a child's life is awesome. And the fact that you James Baldwin is one of my favorites. I love that you highlighted his story, and I just think what you did and do, even for us doulas, is amazing. You're the voice that people need to hear, because then they see why we do the work that we do, and it's not just us doing it. It's a team effort, and I think that I just wanted to thank you for your story. Thank you.
Thank you. That means the world. Thank you so much.
Anyone else want to speak? Okay, the music's playing. Before I move on, I'm leaving room for you to say something.
Thank you, Anna. It's wonderful to see you again. And I have had your book for a while, and I'm looking forward to prioritizing time for myself to sit quietly and read it.
It's hard to find the time to read a
It
book
really
right
is.
now. I get it.
And I really just appreciate your work, and I'm so excited to see it brought fully, forward, because when we worked with you, it was in the works. You were writing, and then just the idea, all of the ideas, and I know you talked about how it transformed, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm really excited for you and your family, and and I think it's incredible. Thank you for bringing some grounding to honoring women and honoring mothers and honoring Black mothers, and it's really beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's so good to see you.
And that's a really important piece. And I think unless someone else really has something to say, Jesse's got a little heart on the screen. I love when people a little heart on the screen.
I feel the love.
I feel the love. To elevate and appreciate the Black mother is such a precious, precious thing. Because of course, in this culture, mothers are not respected, and Black mothers really aren't. Like, we're just not supposed to have babies. Like,
No.
Unless maybe we're millionaires, and then maybe. But when you look at the mortality numbers, actually, the more money and education you have, the more likely you are to die in childbirth.
I believe that notion that you might go into the room and someone now is also, it goes back to this kind of notion of you can't be uppity. You can't think that you know better than I do. Yeah, I mean, with Beyonce and Serena Williams.
Correct. Mega $1 million women.
The most powerful.
Yeah.
They're told, you don't know what you're talking about. Serena Williams. There's
It
no
was
one who
like,
understands her
excuse me.
body better than Serena Williams.
I would think,
Yeah.
it's like, I need this medication. What part of that did you not understand? Nurse, go get the medication.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, it's this notion that Black women somehow have some higher tolerance for pain. And that's not, like, it's so inhumane. The levels of dehumanization are so inhumane. And I talk a lot about those in the book, the different tropes that have been used against us and how we're always blamed for what happens to us. even though
And
all of the
it's
societal
a,
ills.
it's a double-edged thing. I mean, I'm taking away from white supremacy's nonsense about Black women's bodies. I will claim, and it's been my life experience and the experience of other Black women that I've been blessed to love. We are very strong. We are, but that doesn't get extrapolated into the fact that we don't need medication after we
We're not
have major abdominal
superhuman.
surgery. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so how do we get to hold on to that? You know, and then that's why we are great. I'm so happy you're having a home birth.
I'm so excited. Yeah, we moved to LA, so I was here, and this pregnancy is going so fast. I feel like, and I'm like, I need to get organized. So I'm so happy that I met with my midwife today and love her. It's gonna be awesome.
Do you feel comfortable shouting out your midwife's name?
Yeah, her name's Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen in Los Angeles.
Outstanding. We want to lift up midwife Debbie.
Yeah.
Be happy about that.
And
Yeah,
I mean, from the first moment, you know, she was like, I mean, honestly, as much as I'll be right beside you, I don't play that big of a role. She's like, I'm just here to make sure things go as they should, and that you're
such a different
supported.
world. Midwifery care is such a different world, like actual midwifery care.
Yeah.
You know, basically people get mad at home birth midwives because it's like, you didn't do anything. Like,
I'm just here to make sure you're good.
You were healthy and you just had a baby and I was just there, you know, kind of like the stewardess on a plane is not really there to serve you drinks. The stewardess on a plane is trained for the emergency that almost never happens.
Yeah.
That staff is there to help you if something goes wrong. But in the meantime, they're serving drinks.
Yeah.
And the midwife sitting in the corner knitting. And if everything's doing well, she's gonna knit. And when the baby comes out, she'll be like, yeah. Doctors will have their hands in machines and their nonsense all over you, causing harm. Causing harm. Well, I am, you know, allow me to say again how incredibly proud I am of you. I know that your family is just cooing over you and everything that you're doing. I want to wish you every continued success and a beautiful second born. I'm looking forward to the pictures and hearing the story.
Yes.
And really thank you for your time. I mean, I know you're so busy now running around being all famous.
I don't know about that. But thank you so much for inviting me. I hope you all enjoy the books, and I love feedback, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm big on social media, as Kathleen and Cesar know. So just let me know what you think of it. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much, dear.
Thank you. All my love.
Kiss Michael Malachi and Big Michael.
I will.
So I want to thank everybody for being here. Wish you all a good night. This this recording will end up on YouTube eventually. When you find it on YouTube, please feel free to like it and subscribe to our channel. It's our pleasure to bring information birth related and parenting related to the wide world of sports. We want more empowered mamas and more blessed babies and more proud papas and happy parents in this world, because it's only parents that really have the ability to change things once they take on that responsibility and mantle on knowing that they can. So good night to all my beautiful doulas and our guests, and I'll see you all next week.
Good night.
Peace and baby blessings, y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.